All right, so the next conversation, the next topic I want to talk about is travel. So there were a lot of people traveling over the past couple of months, and a lot of people traveling over the last couple of months, and they wanted to fly all sorts of places. Now, in the US, we had a pretty significant winter storm, knocked out a bunch of flights, knocked out power a bunch of places. The Texas grid failed again, and people got stranded at the airport. It was a genuinely miserable time to be trying to get on a plane to get anywhere. Friends of mine got stuck in airports. It just wasn't great. However, you would have thought that after the winter storm went away, the airline woes would kind of work themselves out. And this is kind of where the story gets interesting, because what happened was not that. And specifically on Southwest Airlines, there were still way too many cancellations to attribute to the storm. And when people started looking into it, they realized that Southwest had not been updating its technology in order to maintain accurate inventories of where their crews were, where their planes were, and keeping track of their flights. Now, by the way, guys, there's two things you should know about the airline industry in general, and especially the airline industry in the US. One, flights typically get overbooked by about 5% anyway. And so if your flight suddenly gets canceled, or you suddenly get booked onto another flight for seemingly no reason, that's part of the reason why, because airlines are naturally trying to fill planes 105% to pad their profits as much as possible. And then if you get stuck, if you get in trouble, then guess what? Sucks to be you, as far as they're concerned, right? And by the way, if you go to airports, oftentimes you'll hear at the gate an announcer saying, "Hey, if you're willing to take a later flight, please come up, and we'll upgrade your class, or we'll refund your bag, or whatever," right? The reason they're doing this is because the flight that you were supposed to get on has been filled up, right? Everyone who checked in, at least 100% of the people who said they were going to check in, checked in. And so this is kind of one of the first things that airlines do to just kind of make you miserable. The second is called the misery index. Now, I'm not making that up. There's a legitimate misery index. There's been a ton of reporting on it. And essentially, airlines have calculated to what extent they can make your life miserable, and how much you are willing to pay to make your life less miserable if you know if they tweak certain things, right? So like will you buy extra legroom? Will you buy a seat assignment if they make randomly selected seats uncomfortable or unhappy, right? If they intentionally break up families, will you pay for more essentially, this is just how can they get you to shell out more money for what is already a miserable experience. And this is what the misery index is meant to do, right? It's meant to just figure out how terrible they can be as a service and still get you to use them and still get you to pay. Now, why do you have to use them, right? Why does it feel like there are no alternatives? And this is because there have been lots of mergers. So the past 20, 30 years, there have been a bunch of mergers in the airline industry, and that's why it seems that we only have like 4 or 5 different airlines to choose from, because they have been buying up all of these other airlines, and the market share of each airline is like it's like a quarter, or around a quarter. So ultimately, you don't have any choice, and everyone is using bad terms. Now, I talked about this a long time ago. So, like, what are you supposed to do when all of the options in this field are terrible, right? How does the free market, how do you correct this type of behavior? So, truthfully, what's supposed to happen is the government is supposed to step in, right? So, in a capitalist system, the government is supposed to step in. Well, so who's in charge of the transportation department? Well, it's Pete Buttigieg, who, by the way, had no experience in transportation whatsoever when he went into this position. Joe Biden actually made fun of him on the campaign trail for not having any experience in the transportation sector, and he still got transportation secretary. By the way, this is because all this is backroom wheeling and dealing, okay? This isn't about your competency at the secretary level, the cabinet level. This is about, political favors. This is, he who wins the victory gets the spoils, right? And so First of all, it was just a terrible cabinet appointment in general because Pete Buttigieg had absolutely no experience. He was a mayor from a small town who thought he could run for president because he had worked at McKinsey or something. Terrible idea. Anyway, right before the holiday season, a bunch of attorneys general had sent letters to the Department of Transportation saying, "Hey, FYI, we think that there's some terrible, you know, stuff coming in terms of flights, and that it's going to be really bad for passengers." And all of these warnings were ignored. And when Pete Buttigieg went on TV and was interviewed about this, he said, "Oh, I'm going to tell him." I'm like, okay, but that's not binding. Look, the government has power to make these companies bend to their will. You can exercise fines. You can you can issue consent decrees, which requires organizations to do certain things to meet standards, right? You can um, you can ask the government to investigate whether there's some antitrust issue going on, right? Whether there's monopolistic behavior or anti-competitive behavior going on. The government has so much ability to make this problem go away, and they just haven't been because ultimately they don't care, or these airlines, just like every other business in America, they pay their bribes. They make sure that to the extent that they have to, they give politicians campaign contributions, and they make sure that, hey, remember that time that I helped you get elected? Well, you're not going to regulate me, you're not going to fine me, and this is what happens, right? And I love talking about corruption because it is everywhere. America might be the single most corrupt country in the world. It is so crazy how much legalized corruption we have in this country. Anyway, going back to the Southwest issue specifically. So they had technology that I believe when I was reading the reports, it was like from the 1990s, which is totally crazy. Can you imagine if you had to use a service whose website hadn't been updated since from the 1990s? You'd lose your mind. You'd never use that service again. But apparently, that's what Southwest was doing. And interesting that they didn't feel that they should update their technology, because when you look at their filings with the government, they've been paying dividends, they've been reporting great profits, and so what happened? You just didn't feel like you had to update your services. We weren't concerned that something might like this happen. No, it's because they don't care. It's because ultimately, at the end of the day, every corporation on earth has one job: to make more profit and to give more money to shareholders. And they will cut any corner they have to in order to make that possible. And what Southwest demonstrated is that they care so little about anything else but profit that they will allow themselves to use a system from over 20 years ago. No, almost 30, from almost 30 years ago. And they'll take government money to keep their staff on because they got PPP loans, and then they will use that money to pay their shareholders back. They will use that money to encourage pilots to retire so they can keep more of that money without making it look like they're reducing their workforce. They will do literally any sneaky, disgusting trick in the book as long as it means an extra penny. And you know who suffers? We, the American people, suffer because in order to travel across this country, and this country is 3,300 miles wide. In order to travel across this country, you have to get on a plane. And Southwest is one of four or five major airline carriers left in existence in this country. You almost are guaranteed to get stuck with them at least once in your life. And then what happens, right? No one's looking out for you. So I hope, and this is a hoping on hope, I guess, that someone in the federal government has learned a lesson here, and that they seriously take a look at Southwest and other airlines, and they look at what do you do if you have to break these guys up, right? Are they engaging in anti-competitive behavior? Should it even be legal for them to do this 5% overbooking? When you buy a ticket, right, that's a contract. You are paying money for a service. How is it right for them to be able to renege that service without giving you a refund, right? A lot of these airlines, instead of giving you refunds, they give you vouchers for another flight, or they give you an upgrade. That's not good enough. They should be required by law to, and by the way, for any other contract in the world, this is what it would look like, right? If you and I had a contract for something and I reneged, you would get the other part, you would get your portion of the contract back. That's how it's supposed to work. But for some reason in America, the government said, don't worry, it's okay. They can modify your contract and not give you full refund and not give you recompense. And they can give you some token item like a voucher, which costs them absolutely nothing. They've got your money up front, which is what they wanted anyway. And you're miserable because you can't be where you were supposed to be at the time. A flight is a service, it's a promise. Buying a plane ticket is a promise. We, the airline, will take you, the customer, from A to B to the best of our ability, for with all the conditions that are in our control, and we'll actually do it. We won't get you to go to the airport at ridiculous hours just to cancel your flight, make you wait hours and hours and hours in delays. This is such a problematic issue in a country so big where flights happen all the time. There are so many planes. Just go to Skyscanner. You can .com. I think it's .com. You can see how many planes are flying over the U.S. at any given time. This is a country obsessed with air travel. We cannot have a system where it is okay for one of the major airlines to just not function. And that's my whole piece on this. The government needs to get involved and do its job.
Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, throw a like on it, share with your friends, and subscribe for more of our content. You can also find all of our videos and clips on youtube.com. Just search Let Them Eat Bread and you'll find all of our content. Alright guys, see you next time. Bye for now.